Speak Amazon domain name equals news greater than the year is 1908. The world moves at the speed of a horse. Roads are dirt paths. They turn to thick, impassable mud in the rain. Cities are dense islands of industry. The countryside is a distant, isolated place. The automobile exists. But it is a toy for the wealthy. It's a complex, handcrafted machine. It is fragile and expensive. A single car costs more than a skilled worker earns in 2 years. It is a symbol of status. Not a tool for the people. But one man sees a different future. Henry Ford. He has a radical, almost impossible vision. He wants to build a motor car for the great multitude. A car so simple a man can maintain it himself. A car so rugged it can handle the worst country roads. And a car so low in price that any man with a good salary will be able to own one. This was not a business plan. It was a declaration of war on the old world. The weapon for this war was the Model T. It was not a beautiful car. It was brutally practical. Its frame was made of a new material. Vanadium steel. It was a metal alloy, light yet incredibly strong. Perfect for America's terrible roads. Its engine was simple. 4 cylinders, 20 horsepower. It used a unique planetary transmission. It could be driven by almost anyone. The car sat high off the ground. It could navigate deep ruts and even shallow streams. It was designed for a world that did not yet have highways. Initially, the Model T was built like every other car. In a large room at the Piquette Avenue plant. Skilled craftsmen worked in teams. They stood around a stationary chassis. They moved around the car, gathering parts. A worker would walk to a stockroom. He would find a fender. He would carry it back to the chassis. He would then search for the right bolts and nuts. He would hand file a part if it didn't fit perfectly. Each car was a unique creation. This was the artisanal method. And it was painfully slow. A single Model T took over 12 hours of labor to complete. The price was $825. It was cheaper than other cars. But it was not cheap enough. Ford's dream was stalled. It was trapped by the very methods used to create it. He could build a car for the masses. But he couldn't build it fast enough, or cheap enough. He needed a new blueprint. That blueprint was not found in an engineering textbook. It was inspired by a place of grim efficiency. The slaughterhouses of Chicago. There, workers stood in a line. A carcass hung from an overhead trolley. It moved past them. Each man performed one single cut. One single task. Over and over. It was a disassembly line. A marvel of brutal, streamlined logic. Ford's engineers watched this process. And they asked a revolutionary question. Could this be done in reverse? Could a machine be built this way? Not taken apart? Back in Detroit, at the new Highland Park plant, the experiments began. They were simple at first. Crude. In 1913, they laid out 6,000 parts on the floor. Workers assembled a magneto for the engine. The process was a chaotic mess of wasted motion. Then they tried something new. They broke the assembly into 29 distinct steps. They placed the workers along a bench. They slid the component from one station to the next. The assembly time was cut in half. This was the first glimmer of the new system. Then came the chassis. The backbone of the car. At first, workers simply pushed the frame from one station to another. It was an improvement. But it was not yet a system. The real breakthrough was a rope. A rope was tied to the front of a chassis. It was attached to a winch. The winch was turned on. The chassis began to move. It crept across the factory floor. Workers walked alongside it. They added parts as it moved. They had to keep pace with the machine. This was the birth of the moving assembly line. Soon, the rope was replaced. A powered, endless chain was set into the floor. It moved at a constant, unyielding speed. 6 feet per minute. The chassis was now in perpetual motion. And the world of manufacturing was changed forever. The chaos was replaced by a precise mechanical ballet. The car came to the worker. The worker no longer moved. He stood in one place. And the parts came to him. Gravity-fed slides and chutes were built above the line. A bin of bolts sat exactly where the worker needed it. A fender slid down a ramp, arriving just as the chassis passed. A motor was lowered by a crane at the precise moment it was needed. Every wasted motion was eliminated. Every second was accounted for. This required a second, hidden revolution. The standardization of parts. In the old system, parts were often unique. A bolt might be filed to fit a specific hole. This was no longer possible. Every part had to be absolutely identical. Every screw, every bracket, every piston. This demanded a new level of precision in manufacturing. Gauges and calipers became essential tools. The interchangeability of parts was the invisible engine driving the assembly line. It was an engineering marvel. And the work itself was transformed. A complex job like installing an engine was broken down. It became dozens of simple, repetitive tasks. One man would fit a single bolt. The man next to him would tighten it. The next man would insert a cotter pin. Each worker performed a single function. Over and over. Hundreds of times a day. The time to assemble a Model T chassis plummeted. From 12.5 hours. To 6 hours. To 5. To 2. Finally, it reached an astonishing 93 minutes. Ford had found his blueprint. He could now build cars faster than anyone on Earth. But the blueprint had a flaw. A human flaw. The work was brutal. It was mind-numbingly monotonous. The relentless pace of the line was physically and mentally exhausting. Men quit in droves. To keep 14,000 jobs filled, Ford had to hire over 52,000 men a year. The turnover rate was a staggering 370%. The revolutionary system was on the verge of collapsing under its own human cost. The line was a marvel of efficiency. But it was burning through its most important component, people. Ford needed to solve this problem. His solution was one of the most surprising and audacious business decisions in history. On January 5, 1914, he made a stunning announcement. He was doubling his workers' wages. He would pay them $5 for an 8-hour day. This was unheard of. The industry average was about $2.34 for a 9-hour day. Competitors were shocked. The Wall Street Journal called the plan an economic crime. They thought Ford had gone mad. But this was not an act of charity. It was a cold, calculated strategy. It was an engineering solution to a human problem. The $5 day was designed to do one thing: stabilize the workforce. It would stop the mass exodus of workers. It would attract the best, most reliable mechanics and laborers in Detroit. The high wage would drastically reduce turnover. It would eliminate the massive costs of constantly training new employees. It was cheaper to pay good men more than to constantly replace broken men. Thousands of men flocked to the Highland Park plant. They lined up for blocks, desperate for a job. Ford could now pick the very best. And the strategy worked perfectly. Turnover plummeted. Absenteeism vanished. Productivity soared. But the $5 day had an unintended, world-changing consequence. Henry Ford was not just creating loyal workers. He was creating customers. A Ford employee could now save up and buy the very car he was building. He could purchase a Model T with less than 4 months' wages. Ford was inventing a new consumer class. The American middle class. With his production system perfected and his workforce stabilized, Ford executed the final part of his master plan. He began to relentlessly lower the price of the Model T. Mass production created incredible economies of scale. Ford passed these savings directly to the customer. In 1908, the car cost $825. By 1916, the price was just $360. By the mid-1920s, it fell below $300. The car for the great multitude was now a reality. Millions were sold. The iconic black Model T became a part of the American landscape. This blueprint did more than build a car. It built the modern world. The assembly line spread to every industry imaginable. From refrigerators to radios. It became the fundamental grammar of manufacturing. Roads were paved. Suburbs were born as workers could now live miles from their jobs. The isolation of rural life was broken forever. Society itself was re-engineered. All of it, a consequence of one man's dream. And the hidden engineering blueprint that made it real. A blueprint of steel, steam, and human ingenuity. The blueprint that put the entire world on wheels. /Amazon domain/speak